why feel the need to dodge a mask wearer? When you have surgery, do you avoid your doctor because he's wearing a mask?
No, but my doctor's not in a high walking metabolistic state either. He's quite calm and in place, and he's not breathing excessively, and he changes his mask out like many people can. Is that a fair answer?
Oh, maybe did you say dodge mask wearers or dodge anti-mask wearers?
No, I said dodge mask wearers. I mean, I was part being facetious. Like, I don't care if someone's wearing a mask or not. I'm just basically,
okay.
I'm just kind of bagging on them is all.
Wait.
Yeah, you're making a joke.
You're making a joke about people wearing a mask?
Yeah, meaning to some extent, part of my paradoxical view is that this thing is overblown and it's a little bit of bullshit. And if it's not overblown, then I can always appeal to herd immunity, or I can always appeal to the deficit of wearing a mask that some other experts have argued, that by wearing a mask, you're increasing bacterial reflection and carbon dioxide intake into the system, and hence you're actually debilitating your body's health or something to that effect, meaning that would be a secondary, like if I have to take it to the ropes to push back, I can argue that. And then when you push back with the doctor, then I push back with, well, the doctor isn't in walking. He's not doing, he's standing still. His metabolism is low. His breathing isn't high.
No, the line of my question was, why feel the need to avoid someone wearing a mask? Is someone wearing a mask harming you?
No, well, to me, people wearing a mask now is also emblematic. Like, it's become a symbol set now. It's like wearing a shirt now, or a hat. Like in public, some people wear hats, some people don't. Some people are wearing masks, some people aren't. But if you go into a business now, it's like wearing shoes. No shirt, no shoes, no dice. Now it's no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no dice. Right? Meaning you got to have it all, or you get kicked out. So I dodge them because they're buying. Like, if I don't know where someone's actually coming from, whether or not they're doing it by mandate or whether they're doing it because they buy into it, I dodge them. Right? That was kind of the joke. Anyway, that's what.
Sure. Well, hang on. I appreciate what you just said, but how? I still haven't got an answer to the question. How does an individual wearing a mask, is it a harmful act upon you?
Oh, well, it's a symbol of compliance at this point for me, meaning this whole year is condensed to compliance globally. And so if I'm out in public and I know that people can or cannot wear masks, and either they sincerely believe it or they're defaulting to the side of like what they think is most beneficial, or it's a social norm. In any case, if they have the option and they're wearing a mask, then I know that in some manner they're compliant. And so I dodge those people because like when he mapped it out, I am currently favoring the green part. I'm currently favoring this is not known enough to even have this implemented policy, right? Something to that effect. And so when I say I dodge them, the sincere sub aspect of that is that they're complying to continuing the symbol set, continuing the thing that is said to be going away later on, which may not.
So it's kind of symbolic, right? It's like, I don't want to cheap, right?
Sorry, you broke up.
So I was asking if it's symbolic then. The joke is like, I don't want to hang out with sheep that follow mandates. Is that it?
Yeah, unless upon interaction they say, hey, I don't really buy it either, but my girl
right.
or something like that, right?
Right. But a priori you don't know, and they might be sheep. So yeah.
Yeah, it feels sheepy. And it was even somebody with the sheep mask on. That's funny. Anyway, sorry guys. Now I am rambling a little bit, but I don't know. Did that answer the question? Is that it's a continuance of the symbol set, so it's a continuance of the modus operandi, and I think that is problematic. I mean, I don't want to be a part of that. Maybe it's I'm too punkish.
No, I understand, but my question is, how does that individual wearing a mask cause harm to you that would want you to avoid them? Are you, questioning that.
No, it's fine.
I understand what you're saying about you're putting them in a box, and how confident are you that that box is negative?
I'm not. I don't think they're harming me as much as, unless I was to say something to the effect as, like, a group of people is fundamentally altering my culture or something like that, right? Then I might say, by the prevalence of wearing a mask as a symbol set is a warping of a culture that I loved that I don't want to see happen. And so if you ask for what harm is, then I would say, well, harm then becomes conflated with rudiments of change, something like that. So in other words, there is no true harm. There's my subjective, once again, my preferenced phenomenological subjective mind feels like it's the normal behavior, the normal rudiments are being more warped than I'm prepared to be comfortable with. But I wouldn't necessarily call that a harm. But you could say it's psychologically or culturally tattooing or marking or affecting in some manner. I don't know. Does that answer it?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. And what do any of you guys, is there anyone that sympathizes with anything that I said? Does anything resonate with you guys with regards to that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about it. I don't sympathize at all, right? I'll answer that. Since you asked, and it's very common to, give my actual position. I think that the harm, it outweighs the ask of my community. Yeah, sure, it's compliance, I guess.
You mean benefit?
It was a joke also, meaning I'm also in agreement. That's part of the paradigm. Okay, but I hear you. Thanks. Meaning thanks for stating your exact non-sympathy for my overarching.
Yeah, I think he was asking more about who sympathized with it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just being very truthful. I'm not trying to, I seriously, Lucky, like I think
I seriously appreciate it, actually. I'm giving
Yeah, I mean, I truly am thankful that you took the time and discussed this. Like because honestly, like when I try to do SE on Facebook or something like that, I will throw stuff out there and try to talk to people, and they don't engage. And it's very important that people discuss things to me.
Yeah, I just had a birthday a few days ago, and so I decided for my birthday I was going to put out like really controversial statements. And I got very few front-end happy birthdays this year. A lot of DM happy birthdays, but so that's cool. But I kind of thought, like, it's okay to have disagreement. It's actually needed, and sometimes it's sought. And so if you explicated your innards, meaning if you spoke all of your truths, if any of you did, you would run into huge friction and disagreement about several aspects of who you are, I would imagine. And so I think a lot of people contract that, hold a lot in conditionally, such as their society, and they can get along more fluidly within the grouping of people they're around.
That's truth. That's 100% truth right there.
Well, and the indication of that is that we're all different, at least as much as we're all the same. Meaning, if not more, or if maybe less, in certain circumstances. But that's what I meant by agreement is a form of truth, because it overrides that subjective disclosure domain. It is your concerns are about external agreed upon objective reality, And then theologically, the problem becomes that you don't have an empirical world to agree upon, so you're talking about a non-pointable world. And so it seems like a huge disjunct that's rarely pointed to the comparison of empirical knowledges relative to non-empirical or ostensible knowledges. Well, that's
So,
my problem.
so Lucy, how do you deal with major disagreements? Sorry, can I be heard?
Yes, you are.
Lucy, can you hear me? Lucky.
Who's Lucy?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, Lucky. He meant Lucky. Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. Well, okay. There is some disambiguation that occurs, and so there is an approximation of disambiguation. Like you calling me Lucy in compared to Lucky, I thought you were addressing someone else's name that I didn't see in the room that you knew. And until that major disagreement in my mind, I didn't think you were addressing me until it was disambiguated such that I knew. So at that point, then I was able to get over that and what I would consider at first a major disagreement. Like I totally thought you were addressing someone else. But I was also curious why, if you were addressing someone else, you were kind of, like you were immediately going to come in having not spoken earlier and addressing someone else that I'm not certain was speaking earlier, as if you were trying to take away the argument. So I had this degree, like, okay, there's a domain where maybe I didn't know who you were addressing, so I was left there until the disambiguation occurred. Maybe that's analogous, like an isomorphic, you can compare that to major disagreements. But like if I say I believe in Muhammad and I believe in Jesus Christ as a prophet, or not as a prophet, as the Son of God, something like that, like I can imbue all sets that standing alone, I can hold them as if I had 100 arms and 100 hands that could hold 100 positions. Right, but only if I move the hands or try to clap the hands together is there a contradiction. And so I don't worry about that. And so those are major differences, right? You'd say Islam and Christianity is a major difference, or occult religions or pagan religions or prehistoric religious sets or whatnot compared to modern or Abrahamic religious sets or whatever the spill out is through Protestantisms and breaches of different religions, Sunni and Shiite or Jews and secular Jews and not, or Christians and Protestants or Catholic or whatever, however it's spread out through, it's just accept that directionality of all of the, meaning accept the 100 hands for the 100 things, and then only in comparison does it become conflicting. And so how do I deal with that? I don't know. Like, I guess try not to clap hands if each hand has an egg in it.
Well, I'm looking for like prescriptive principles, like should we practice toleration or judgments? Should we take people seriously in terms of what they believe and challenge them and have an opinion and, either creating a divide or finding some agreement?
Well, if the coming of age people, like all the way up into like the debutantes and the young men at that age group, you're supposed to, like, it's incumbent upon the older, wiser group that can manipulate that group to not manipulate that group, but to symbolically manipulate them enough such that they become skeptical. As far as the adults, once they've reached this certain level, they should naturally already have enough whiskers grown that they can try to figure out who's full of shit and who's not, or how skeptical they should be or shouldn't be, and then position themselves according to, whoever they, how they are, but know that they're adults at that point. And so they don't need to always go forthright and put the first foot forward of, hey, I want I think everyone should be overly skeptical and overly wary and overly nervous, and like some people have that temperament, and so I would encourage the population to do more engagement generally with a sense of communal trust. But like in a lack of a police state, I would still consider carrying a weapon or being prepared for being wrong. I don't know.
But I don't understand what skepticism has to do with...
Yeah. I have a question. What's the difference between cynicism and skepticism?
That's a great question. Cynicism is having, I believe it's having some effect about the world bowl you over more than once, such that you're submitted to it, meaning your engagement with the world is a coming from a history of suppression or oppression, and so the difference between cynicism and skepticism is informed also by the world that you live in phenomenologically. So that's one kind of wizard. But skepticism is also a language symbolic set of doubt and accordance with logical principles as found both logically and then into the grammar to some extent. Meaning, I would say life, cynicism, or being life effect, and then there's grammar. How one actually deals with the medium in which they're articulating the exchange for logical principles, and then skepticism. So skepticism goes over those domains as well as being informed by life experience. And cynicism is mostly an expression of knowing that life can go bad and then expressing that. That's how I would define that, I guess. Did that kind of answer? Did that? I mean, I think it did. Meaning, do you concur? Do you concur with that description of cynicism versus skepticism?
I didn't understand. I'm sorry. I actually didn't hear what you just said.
I just
forgive me, please.
Do you agree? Are you in concurrence with my description of the difference between cynicism and skepticism, or how would you articulate your stance to show why you asked that question, or what the distinction is that you were trying to draw out of me?
Yeah, thanks. I actually had some trouble following what you meant, and you're correct that I did have some kind of ulterior motive in asking that, because I wonder if somebody who needs to see everything proven for themselves, in other words, say like not you, but just like, for example, like a flat earther. I just wonder if, because I think they think they're being skeptical, which is honorable. I get the need to like prove something for yourself. That's great if you can do it.
Meaning,
say again?
What irritates you about it is that you're self-skeptical in that you have not been to the space station yet. So you yourself have not witnessed of your own eyes, and so you're left with merely the construct of how knowledge is of satellites in the cosmos, and what you're inculcated with already in comparison. But you're upset, I think, because you can't yourself say, no. I've been up there and I fucking see it.
No. I make a distinction maybe differently than you between cynicism and skepticism, and I don't want this to like land on you, and so I'm using the flat earthers as an example. So I think they would think of themselves as honest truth seekers and skeptics themselves, but I think that they're more cynical in that so I think of skepticism as questioning evidence, okay? And then I think of cynicism as maybe not necessarily questioning motivations, but maybe ascribing motivations to various parties. So, for example, like I can take it on face value. I can look at NASA photos of around Earth and I say, I believe this because I don't have any question about the motivations of people at NASA. But I think flat earthers do. And I think it leads them into, well, I think that's cynicism. When you start to ascribe motivations to...
You mean you're being the cynic then, if you're going to ascribe their motivations for...
Yeah, because what can you really tell about a person's motivations? You can take it on face what they say to you, or you can say they're lying to me, and you can look at what their actions are. But really, it's a path that doesn't go very far, and so I just wonder how meaningful questions' motivations are.
Well, the lattice that you out of hand accept NASA's satellite photos. When I call it a lattice, meaning that there's conjoining parts to your knowledge set that lead you to agree that they have taken these photos, and those photos are quote unquote real, or like as purported. And so the lattice of knowledges that you accept up to satellite imagery and so forth, they're not necessarily in disagreement of the segments of the lattice, but of the joint. Why are you conjoining them? Meaning, kind of like the way I was arguing with the mask wearing or coronavirus. To some extent, there appears to be an acceptance of the lattice because you haven't been shown why the joints are problematic, or you don't think they're problematic, or they're not problematic. But your cynicism is actually against them and their way of thinking, or their way that they would want to disassemble the joint, or the way they think the joint isn't actually there. So why do you believe some portion of this? Like, then they think, well, you agree with the lattice of thought without having been out there yourself. That's why I said I think you're rude, is because you have not been able to get, I'm a fucking astronaut, I saw it, get off my back, fuck you, right? You're more like, you buy it, and then you're cynical towards them because they don't believe in how you've conjoined. Like, they got a problem, like, hey, Photoshop, hey, 3D
cynical
things.
Towards the flat earthers?
Yeah.
I'm really sympathetic towards the flat earthers because I can totally... Yeah, because I can totally understand wanting to be able to prove everything for yourself. I just don't have the time for that. And I used to be in that mindset, personally.
Right.
Now, so I am cynical about some things. Like, someone comes to me with a ghost story, these things never pan out, or a story about a UFO and the abduction. These things never pan out, or Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster. I am cynical about those because I don't have the time to cognitively, to research all this stuff.
But are you cynical because you don't have a claim like they have a claim of things that you would say extrinsic or ex parte to what you call normal, but they do have
I'm cynical because they're fruitless claims. I've looked into them a lot, and they never pan out.
But are they fruitless because you're looking for agreement in the objective world, or are they fruitless because, meaning, are you cynical because there's all these people that make these claims, and because they themselves cannot get on the same page, like they're their own hand holding an egg of 100 hands holding eggs, and you can't clap with it? You know what I mean? Like, it's you're not party to that. And so you're cynical because there's this series of people making these claims, and you're upset because why? Again, I mean,
I'm not upset.
Oh, you're not upset. You're cynical, but you're not. And then I'm ascribing a scenario that I know to not be your ascription of the scenario, but I'm trying to approach you.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out what is your root of cynicism, or of populations that fundamentally are disagreeing with your root norm.
I'm having difficulty
sorry, it might be wordy.
Understanding what your question to me is.
What I'm saying is, describe again why you're cynical.
I'm not sure if it's useful for the whole room or whatever, but
okay, I'm sorry.
To me, maybe, I don't know if this helps, but why would I trust NASA? Should I be... Is it skeptical or cynical? Should I trust NASA? Is it worth my time? So I look at things like well, they seem to have been able to shoot, a rocket around the moon and land people on the moon. And should I believe this? Well, it wasn't really called out by other countries as being fake. And, so I have these reasons to trust it because it hasn't been challenged like in the world, like Russia had a lot of motivation, I would think, to challenge whether that's true. They didn't. And so I can kind of be somewhat assured that
but the
that's
Russians,
the case.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but the Russians,
No,
at
you're
the
good.
time that we claimed to have landed on the moon, right? Meaning I'll refer to it as a claim instead of as a fact, right? Just for the sake of the discussion. I think it's coming in neutral. So the claim that we landed on the moon, the Russians,
Sorry.
it was about
What'd you say?
disproving. I'm saying Russians, that we challenge them, like disprove that this happens, right? Even though it could have been, a filming production, and some of the flat earthers claim that it was a filming production. I'm sorry, did I cut the guy off? I was just curious. Like, what's upsetting you about the way the history... Like, basically, it sounds to me like you want to believe the history of the way things were, the way in which the lattice of knowledge is built. And I don't know, maybe like he said, maybe I'm not being productive to conversation. So I apologize again. Okay.
No, and I apologize too, because in the middle of what you were saying, I think I couldn't hear you and I had to reset, so I didn't quite hear everything that you had to say.
I was just saying, like, are you upset because, meaning, I'm trying to add an alternative history which suggests that when we landed on the moon, if there were Russian scientists that disagreed, we said, prove we didn't land on the moon. So they didn't, because they can't, because they say, well, the Van Allen belts. Boom. Like, that's it. Boom. Like, hey, no, we got through it. No, it's not as dangerous as you thought, or whatever the flat earther would argue, right? And so my worry is more about you're using the fact that Russia didn't contend or no other countries contended with it as evidence that it occurred, which I think is good. Meaning that
it's just one, I like if it was fake, I would expect to see that. I would expect to see it challenged, and it's not.
Well,
there's other things.
But we have the internet now, and back then maybe it was challenged. Maybe there's Russian newspapers saying we know that the U.S. didn't go there. Maybe that's been printed. Maybe it's in some microfiche thing you could draw up on a Russian library.
Yeah. It's possible such a thing could be true.
I mean, news moved differently then. Plus, the U.S. had Hollywood. We have Hollywood. So we had all the time for Hollywood. We dominated movies. We dominated the projection of things to the whole world, and then they didn't afford it, or they didn't have it, and it wasn't their business to do what business we had here. And so we had a head start in that domain, and then we have a head start on going to the moon domain, or at least the claim of going to the moon domain. I mean, some people think that Elon Musk is just doing what's always been done in terms of drilling holes under the ground, and that we have a whole network already of ant colony alien subhumans that are sworn to secrecy to not disclose their entrances to the ant world underneath. It's like, I'm just saying, like, what is the root? When you say cynicism, is this an emotional thing, or is this like a benign description of like impunity towards the absurdity of other people?
Well, I think this is
Cut out, William. Or is it just me?
No, I think he cut out. Yeah, I was wondering if it was... William, can you hear us?
Well, I'm hearing a claim that possibly could be SE'd.
Maybe someone wants to volunteer.
See, I thought this is my own brand of SE, by the way, which isn't SE at all, but that's,
By the way, I must answer your previous question earlier. I do sympathize with your point. What? I think I land in different conclusions or in a different place epistemologically, but I do sympathize because most people hear about, I don't know, skepticism against COVID or about anti-vaccines or flat earthers or anything in between, and they just automatically say they are crazy and they're wrong. And, I don't exactly do that. I think it's fair to have certain degree of skepticism. And I guess the problem is when you take it too far, right? But it's hard to tell when you took it too far. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's possible to take skepticism way too far and just make things up accidentally, That's a problem I've been studying for a little while. And when one falls into that, they don't realize it, You from the inside, you cannot tell that you've taken it too far. So that's a problem I'm interested in.
When you were mentioning that, you were making the distinction for me between the saltwater and the freshwater, meaning that you categorized the anti-vaxxers in the flat Earth category, meaning you used 3 examples. I forgot one of them. The other one was flat Earth and anti-vaxxers. Meaning they were either already like anti-vax is an overarching historic claim as opposed to anti-COVID vax, which would maybe be more normal. But so you could conflate those two. But the fact is you're saying have gone too far, meaning if you found out that there was a cult of flat earthers that raised kids not only to be flat earthers, but to go out of their way mathematically to help these kids become engineers to prove flat earth, all their capacity, you'd say you've gone too far. And then you'd be really upset.
I don't think I would. But again, I'm not. Maybe I wasn't clear. I wasn't trying to conflate those examples. You know how certain ideas are not really popular in the mainstream. You know what I'm talking about? Like, anti-vaccines and flat earthers. They're not mainstream and what you call, the fresh water. Right? I was talking more about that. I didn't mean to conflate or to say you're wrong.
I know you didn't. It was to me, I just noted that that's how you categorized it. I know that wasn't your point, but I noticed that was the distinction in which you put that, meaning that the overarching narrative is antithetical to what you're going to call a conspiracy. And so the overarching narrative is COVID is real. We got masks. We got the symbol. We got
I see.
Showing the masks. So you're just going to group everything there because any counter narrative that goes against that is now conspiratorial.
Yeah, no, that's not my claim. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, no, I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that. So on one hand, you have the mainstream. On the other hand, you have anti-mainstream. You could say, like. People swimming against that mainstream current. And I don't define conspiracy theories or anything like that, or people taking skepticism too far. I don't define any of that in terms of, if you go against the mainstream, then you're a conspiracy theorist. I don't claim that at all, just to clarify. In other words, a conspiracy theory could be right,
Well, how close are you to being a flat earther out of curiosity, or an anti-moon lander?
It's called a moon truther.
Okay, thank you. I'm pretty far, I would say.
You're pretty far from those things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I am too, but I will admit, and I'll just tell you guys outright, for 72 hours, I was a flat earther, meaning this fucking world was flat. Like in my mind, and that's when I knew I was preferencing. Like every individual has a phenomenological subjective view, and autistic people often have that type of view about knowledges as well. And so, and I'm not saying I'm an autistic. I'm not trying to do some reveal, but what I'm trying to say is this: is that my paradigm had shifted for a 72-hour period before pop. I went back into Globe Earth. And I found that shift was like a religious conversion of sorts, but it was also like an empirical observational, a test of my observation ability and my acceptance of an inversion of my currently held knowledge set.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go.
Well, what swayed you to fall into a flat Earth belief first, and then what persuaded you not to believe the Earth is flat?
Great question. Well, I was kind of like being trafficked or trafficking myself through YouTube videos on like skylines and boats rising and just whatever was put out by flat earthers for a while. And I do a lot of landscape painting. And I was up at this place called Flaming Gorge, which is like a Wyoming, Utah reservoir. And I was sitting out there atop of it, right? Because it's like a plateau. The gorge is like developed down through a plateau. And so I'm at the top of it, and it was just this analysis of skyline in my head, and then a remembrance of flying on planes where the oval shape of the window became an argument in my head as like a type kind of lens to even on, because I used to work for JetBlue, I flew a lot and whatnot, and there was this sense of like there was no way for me to disconfirm, the idea that what I was seeing, even at that low altitude of a plane, was in fact not merely a disk, right? So I was left with a type kind of like the structure, the rudiments of my belief about the matter were kind of becoming granulated based on my own personal observation, right? And so then when I preferenced the idea that the lattice that brings somebody to agree with the globe Earth, such as we land on the moon and we have satellites, and the lattice of structure of information about how we agree the infrastructure of the internet and all sorts of other things is put together relative to, not cables running, under the ocean, but like satellite shit, right? So it was when I preferenced my own phenomenological description, I was left with I can't know that it's not, so I had to abandon the claim to it for 3 days. And then it kind of like a rubber, like a tennis ball cut in half, and you're trying to flatten it out and it popped back. Bonk. It was just kind of like there was too much other background lattice data about the way things were put together to carry on in a healthy, what I consider a healthy mental state, such that I popped back to globe Earth, meaning it seemed more coherent overall to believe also in the lattice and then perceive when I do look out. Like I remember I used to live on Venice Beach, so I'd stare at the ocean a lot, and sometimes I would see it as flat, and sometimes I would see it as slightly curved, slightly bowed. And I remember both those sincerities about perceiving this oceanscape, such that it allowed me to pop back to being a globe earther. But I'm sympathetic greatly to the flat Earth paradigm, and I don't hold it against anyone that holds that. Does that jive, kind of, as an answer?
I am so much more confused than when we started.
It's your answer, and yeah, cool.
Well, and I don't know whether or not any of you guys experience that, but kind of like if you talk to someone that's colorblind, and you can test for certain color blindness, you have to agree that their phenomenological relationship to the world is different than yours and different than the populations that don't test colorblind or don't test colorblind the way that you do, or if you do test slightly colorblind. And so that's what I mean by you have to entrust a certain, or I tend to inflate other people in my mind what I think is a sympathy for the difference that they're declaring. And so if someone is declaring phenomenologically that that's how they perceive the world, and they don't believe in the lattice of technologies, they think it's described otherly, and that you guys have bought into the lattice, so be it. But they preference their internal subjective view of the world differently, like a blind person might. And so I have to respect that. Meaning I'm not going to go out of my way to say, well, there's a truth of the matter, and I'm no one to say, hey, I'm going to take you along in my spaceship and we're going to fly around the globe real quick and prove it. No, I might have you look at Superman, where he flies around backwards and makes time go backwards and fuck your head up more. I don't know, right? Anyway, so I think you guys also make that distinction between your personal outlook of the world and the group outlook of the world. That hence coherence truth. I mean, that's why I break down truth. You get truth by agreement, truth by coherence, and truth by correspondence. And so the lattice of believing, the satellite lattice of knowledges, is a kind of correspondence truth that agrees. So it's also a type kind of truth of agreement. At coherence, it has a challengeable coherence to it because it runs contra to people's phenomenological description of the claim. And I don't know whether or not that's how I break it that down philosophically. And so I assume you guys have those distinctions too, but you might not articulate them, or you might have paved them over already. I'm also I do deconstruction philosophy, so
I've had one experience of, I'm not sure if similar to your journey. I've had one interesting experience, which was about a topic called dopamine fasts. I don't know if you heard of that. It involves, for one day or a few days, not listening to any music, not having sex, not doing a bunch of things, just kind of to reboot your brain in a sense. Mm-hmm. So I was into that topic a little bit. I didn't consider it a huge, life changer or anything, but I was interested. And then one day, a YouTuber I liked talked about how that stuff was bullshit and pseudoscience. And I was like, wait a second. What's going on? I've experienced it myself. I've seen some studies that made sense. So why is he saying I'm wrong and crazy and, believing bullshit? And it was an interesting feeling to try to see how he perceived the world, and what if he's right and I'm wrong, and he was so convinced that these dopamine fasts were bullshit and pseudoscience. So how can I know the truth? I think it's possibly knowable, but I don't know if I know enough. But it certainly conflicted with my experience anyway. The thing you mentioned about direct observation and experience. So these conflicts I find interesting, although it's possibly dangerous to go too far to some rabbit holes.
No, I
don't know.
You're fine. Meaning, part of this dopamine fast, I don't think included you going outside and having a cigarette. Right? So maybe it did, but meaning dopamine fasting would be to not give yourself any chemical boosters or overt self-stimulus or otherwise stimulus that would pleasure you. So you allow that deficiency to kind of settle, or you efficient and you settle it. But
it's kind of living like a monk for a day.
But by that same accord, meaning, so you have somebody saying that it's not hey, dopamine fasts aren't real, and then you get upset by that. And the problem with it, meaning, so you've experienced that dissonance where you're then looking back saying, well, it was this way. So a comparison, like an isomorphism to it that I would make would be like smoking, meaning some people will smoke for a great deal of time until, then they're like, oh, they see a bunch of poison lungs or black lungs, or they're starting to feel it negatively, or maybe they don't feel it negatively, but maybe the people around them don't want them to do it. But at some point, a lot of people that eventually give up smoking have this shift, and they said, well, now I know that smoking was bad the whole time, and yet I didn't, and so the comparison is something like that. It's like them knowing that while they were doing it, whether they believed that it was bad or they believed the 1950 doctors that said it was good, that or they believed in Native American lore, or they believed in whatever they wanted to about tobacco, or in the way in which it makes, all the benefits that come with it outweighing the bad. There's still a conversion after the fact, and then they have to deny themselves that, and yet they have to agree that they knew it the whole time. Like, they don't have a scapegoat to blame the shift on. And so when the guy tells you that wasn't real, it made you feel like, I mean, in my mind, if I was going through that, I would first isolate my mind away from it, such that I wasn't trying to hammer myself, but just meaning I would have to hammer myself. Like, man, you duped me, or something duped me. The information duped me, or bamboozled you in some way, and then you get upset. But that's what I meant by the maturing mind, like the debutante mind, the young minds that are coming up. They have a different battle now that there's the internet than before the internet, because they have access to adult conversations, and they're trying to integrate that. And so at one time, everyone should experience a sense of bamboozlement in the modern day, I would assume. Meaning, I know it can be played upon and preyed upon even.
Preyed upon how?
What meaning that you can manipulate younger minds differently than you can manipulate older minds, and you can really do it differently in the modern day. Meaning, if you're talking of heavy philosophy and you get a younger mind that comes in, right, their apprehension or their lack of experience with certain topics, as it like that are generally described as experiential for people that are much more matured, meaning people that are speaking wisely, and as adults you would know that what they're expressing comes from a vision of wiseness. For the younger child, they don't have the experience of wiseness. They've only heard the name of the term wise, but they're not wise to something yet. And so that bamboozlement can come up with an entanglement between their sense of agreeing, like a rail, like they're like on a train rail, right? And they don't understand that they can be derailed, because they don't have the requisite experience to know the wisdom. That's I don't know if that makes sense, but that, in other words, so I'm glad you concur with that. But it is different than me becoming a flat earther, but because the dopamine thing is different, but it's not. Meaning, it's still informational.
Right.
So I get that. But to like the cigarette smoking, like I could argue, hey, my mind frame becomes valuable when I smoke. So you might have a self-scapegoating. Like, even if I am wrong, there was something about the process that I'm going to call dopamine deficiency or dopamine
imbalance or whatever.
Yeah, and so you have justification. Like, you don't seem like you're really hurt by this situation. Like, you're not.
And I guess my point was more about. Yeah, I guess my point was not really if dopamine fasts are bullshit or not. It's more about the process that I used to conclude it was real and a good thing, a useful, and then my feelings when I heard it wasn't. And what did I do? In this case, I felt a little disappointed by that guy. Trusted my experience and my previous research and whatnot, but it could very well be that he was right and I was wrong, maybe, and they are indeed just a placebo, maybe, right, or some bullshit. But I was more interested not the topic of dopamine fasts, but just the general process we have to find truth, right? And sometimes having beliefs that are untrue, I guess, or false, but it can get tricky, right? Because, again, the cigarette smoking example, like a smoker, if you look at his actions, he's claiming that smoking is good, right, in his actions, meaning he finds some sort of use, some sort of benefit that outweighs whatever harm.
But why do
right?
you say that's good instead of neutral behavior? Just because he's implementing it? Do you believe that humans only implement the good? Or are we like seats oriented in an auditorium, like preset to quest this quote unquote truth and goodness? Meaning,
I might have spoken. Maybe useful is a better word. What I was aiming towards is the smoker finds something useful in the smoking, right? And I mean, there's a reason why he smokes as opposed to not smoking, correct?
Mhm.
I was more pointing towards that rather than some goodness, philosophical morality or something. It's more about,
Is it also
he's smoking for a reason, right?
Is it also subjective, his reasoning to smoke?
Could be. I don't know. Yeah.
partially.
Well, could be, or is it subjective or objective
It's not
for an individual?
It's not
claim-
fully either, I would say. Meaning you can't isolate it as merely subjective. The guys, if they grew up in the modern world, they've probably heard the science that it's bad, but they do it because of some other reason, or that they don't believe that claim, but they're probably aware of it. And so I would say the fact that they're aware of the claim makes it non-subjective. It makes it communal. Hence exterior, hence objective, partially, but definitely subjective, partially, definitely. That's what I would say.
Okay, let me ask another question. Chocolate ice cream is the best. Is that a subjective claim or an objective claim?
That's also it's statistically, objectively measurable, and if you could measure everyone, meaning if you had a population and 90% of, let's say 70% of people just answer chocolate's better, then that's an objective statistical truth claim based on statistics, but it's also subjective, meaning that it starts primarily as a subjective claim relative to one's diet and one's relationship to being asked their valuation of the quality of flavor, and better than comparison.
I think that helps understand your vision of truth and knowledge. JTC, I wonder, what did you mean by best?
Okay. An individual, this is from one person saying to them, chocolate is the best taste I enjoy. Is that a subjective statement or objective?
Well, and my answer would remain the same, that it's both, meaning it's part of like a Venn diagram. It's the intersection of both of those to some extent, and way more than another. So I think it's heavily weighted to the subjective.
Right. Is it possible for someone's individual likes to be implemented upon others?
Meaning conditioned into others? Sure.
Well, take for example, like chocolate ice cream is it, and that's it. And everybody's going to eat chocolate ice cream because that individual views chocolate as the best flavored ice cream to have, and that's it. We're going to have chocolate ice cream, and no questions about it.
Yeah, you totally missed the English dude talking about the bland English diet compared to the Japanese diet earlier, and he was going off on it. It was something else. But yeah, I mean, if you have to eat something and it's bangers and mash every day, bangers and mash, you're like, Jesus Christ, but then you might get used to it. And then the mundaneness and the consistency itself might have a different valuation of good. Like, I kind of like this way of always eating chocolate ice cream.
But is it possible for other individuals to have a strong disdain for chocolate?
In the same way that let's say you've masturbated to harm yourself, like you're trying to grudge fuck yourself. A weird claim, right? But let's say you're like, I'm gonna beat off really fucking hard. That's different than if you're like soft to yourself. And I think that the nature of your question is analogous to that. Meaning it is possible that you do something in some type of self-disdain about doing it. and you could still consider it good, or something to that effect. Meaning, if you're obligated to only eat chocolate ice cream, or if you're obligated to eat ice cream, then you're obligated to eat chocolate ice cream, and then your relationship to that, you could say, well, this is good, and then you might like reflect more on your sensual thing, like, yeah, this is actually good. But like if you only ate that, then I don't know. Meaning, how reframe everything then?
I was just asking for an individual who has no desire and actually has a strong dislike to chocolate, they're not going to want to eat the chocolate ice cream. So they are, in essence, denied their ability to enjoy ice cream because all there is chocolate ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like the vaccine. When the vaccine becomes mandated, then that's like it's 1-to-1 with that as well. Like, hey, I'm doing something because I'm forced to do it. Right. That's meaning not to disjunct it there. If you didn't want to go there, you might have been driving at something else altogether.
Yeah, no worries. I was just adding, I'm going to bounce and go to a SE practice. Talk to you guys later.
See you.
Thanks.
I'm curious, Lucky, do you see the isomorphisms like pretty similar regarding the mandate aspect?
Yeah, in a way, it's like you're forced to eat this chocolate ice cream whether you like it or not, and that's kind of what, meaning it's weird because in like they've implemented apparently in Canada as a military move. It's rolling out in UK, and with the general compliance, as far as I understand. I wish somebody would send me the news from other countries about how they're dealing with this rollout. And then in the States, there's certain obligations in terms of like, because we're all considered in the States federal citizens and also state citizens within that. And so, but we're also we're kind of chattel. As citizens, we're chattel to the system and the decrees of the system. But in the state that I'm in, the governor has said that while he's in office, as long as he's in office, he will not require a mandated inoculations in this state. So he's allowing for free choice to descend and not eat the chocolate.
Makes
sense.
sense.
I agree that I do agree that the isomorphism is roughly the same.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think that's helpful to understand better perspective on this. Yeah.
But now it's really weird because I don't know whether or not even to speak, as much as the AI records, all the data that you speak into your phone and you speak into the computers and such, and that I'm openly speaking this way, to the extent that there is now not only will you eat the chocolate, but that if you talk against eating the chocolate, that we're going to forbid that. We're going to reel that back, right? That's the second layer of what in the States, the lack of freedom of speech that is controlled once again by the terms of service and your compliance with the platforms that you're using.
Yeah.
That's this issue is both understood by people that are being reeled back as a terms of service issue, but it's also competing with the idea that the platform is considered the public square, and they're kind of an anti-censorship move. But this phenomena is corporate oriented, and it's also difficult because where was I going to go with that? Meaning, it's because the conflict of town square versus having a corporation derail your First Amendment's free speech in the States as we know it. It's a huge problem. There's a disjunct there. Hence, they set up BitChute or something else that they think is free speech. But then on the flip side, the people that want free speech don't want like expression of pedophilias and other things that are on the bottom end still considered,
Right.
Problematic. Meaning my morality suggests that information is rightly deleted and prosecuted and problematic in terms of like my morality about humans' relationship sexually to children. Right. So, but that it's meaning that wave has already passed. And so if you find it popping up, like a lot of people still find plenty of abuse showing up, it's almost like that's part of the swamp, I guess. I shouldn't use that term because Trump kind of overdid it, but it's part of what's coming out in data collection. I don't know. I'm babbling.
Yeah, but I mean that makes sense. I wonder how you envision or rather, what's the process for finding that boundary? For example, pedophilia promoting messages, that's okay to censor, but then stuff like vaccine skepticism, for example, or COVID skepticism, you express that's not okay to censor. So I'm curious, what's the criteria? Have you thought about
the distinction?
What's the process to decide?
The distinction is the term, like, for the company to exist as a federal law, pedophilia is already out, right? So if it creeps in, it's a problem. But reeling back on the COVID free speech, the appeal then is internal to the company's terms of service. So it's not a federal mandate, but it's seemingly because corporations are in bed now, meaning they pay off and have lobbyists in the states, and essentially we're part of a corporatocracy in terms of money influences and the recycling of money upward and the dominance of corporations. That particular, Amazon not paying federal taxes or something like that, which they don't, it becomes a problem. They still have a terms of service, same thing with YouTube and whatnot. So I'm just saying that the COVID is a corporate issue. Pedophilia is a federal legal pre-established limit.
I see.
Violation,
that makes sense.
Is different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Out of curiosity, because normally you guys filter through theological domains, but what, or often, but have you guys come to, you guys seem to admire the SC, the Street Epistemology methodology, and it requires something of the interlocutor to accept. Not always, but often. Otherwise, you're falling into rabbit holes. But meaning, have you guys been able to utilize it to fetter out your differences theologically amongst the community, or do you notice that amongst the community, the majority of people run atheistic, and that it's kind of like a bulwark against theism generally, or I don't know. How do you guys describe your relationship to this community and your relationship to different theological domains utilizing the SEC system? Very specific question. I'm kidding. I chuckle there. Anyway, I'm gonna go about 5 minutes and listen and have a cigarette and leave my laptop in here. So I'll be listening now.
Oh, okay. I wanted to respond and I was muted. So you said you're listening? Okay. Personally, I have lots of respect to religion in general, and I kind of don't really like certain ways of doing SE that are biased towards atheism. So that's kind of my experience. I have a lot of respect for religion. And yeah, I think it's a common stance in the community to kind of use SE as a way of maybe not pushing atheism towards others, but promoting it a little bit, maybe gently. And yeah, I don't love that specifically. That's not something I'm interested in. But in general, the community in here is pretty friendly, and there are some religious people, and that's cool. It's just that I feel like predominantly there are atheists in SE, and not all, but many of them kind of try to promote atheism, I think, even within their SE practice, which I think it's not ideal. But anyway, that's my opinion.
Cool. Right on. Well, shucks. I kind of need to move into a passive mode, I think, myself, or drop out of the room. But I totally appreciate you guys, having the intercourse or dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah.
I enjoyed having intercourse as well.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was trying to maintain my connection, and I was having trouble with my internet, and my family kept interrupting me. And so if I kind of dropped out, and I feel like it didn't really add that much to the conversation, but I was having a lot of difficulty paying attention and maintaining the actual internet connection. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I'm just kind of migrating around my place and my systems in one location now. So that's why, hence passive role. But, and I get it. Bad connection. Yeah. Bad connection. Family. All right. Thanks, guys.
William, you need to invest in a better connection. You need to invest millions.
No, I was in the bedroom with my door closed, and all of a sudden my kid is like, the internet's down. Of course, it's like the biggest problem in the world. I'm like,
catastrophe.
Hey, working for me. And then my wife comes in, the internet's down. I can't do any work. I'm like, go ahead, reset the internet. I'm trying to pay attention here, and so it was like I had to bail and just go, hey, you guys can reset the internet yourselves. Just hit this button here. And anyway, I wasn't able to pay attention.
So, but I'm just going to open this up is, what do you guys think about competing epistemologies? This general topic, but meaning not just paradigms, but whole, or something that would seemingly be differing or competing paradigms or epistemologies.
What I know is that what they accuse me, I didn't piss on anything or what? Epistemology?
No, epistemology, not peace.
I didn't do that. They say I paid for... I didn't do that, okay?
Mr. Trump, did you let the hooker pee on you?
No, I'm a germaphobe. I've been a germaphobe for a very long time. It's a dirty lie.
So regarding epistemologies, I have a short and concise answer, which is, I love two traditions, really long-term traditions that humankind has had, which are science, and then also the other one is religion. And I really enjoy both approaches to building knowledge.
Yeah, man. Yeah, now I'm carrying around my laptop. And is it true, Mr. Trump, that it was the Russians pissing on you that made you a germaphobe? But you mentioned truth and conditions.
Wonderful thing. It was Obama's previous bedroom. That's the important thing. They put me in that room.
That means you're important, right?
It's important that the Obamas were there, and
In all seriousness, though, as far as competing epistemologies, if you want to compare science and religion, I kind of see value in both too. I was really into a lot of different kinds of religions, and I'm probably just doing a pendulum swing at this point, kind of towards rationality for the last several years. But I'm kind of on the fence. There's a little bit of, I see there's usefulness with both. Even just as much as just being able to relate to people, just on the most simplest terms, hey, I can relate to somebody that, is a Christian or into Krishna or whatever. Like, that's in the most just basic level.
And what would you? Oh, shit! Would you say? Would you say that one of the biggest issues with theists, like on a rudimentary level, has to do whether or not they believe in a singular God or a multitude of gods? I mean, is that one of the rudiments? I think it's a rudiment. So I guess I'm asking you, like, do you think that's a rudiment of competing theological epistemologies? Like, that's greater than the differences amongst monotheists?
I'm not sure if you were asking William, but personally, I think that's rather than epistemologies. Does that make sense?
Well, even you mentioning truth traditions, a value of truth traditions, like that hit me as like, oh, that itself is an expression of a competing epistemology. Meaning I can't deny it, but I haven't incorporated it as such. But I like that you framed it that way, because it's viable. So you've converted me. I'm going to use that. Truth traditions.
And why did you say true? Because what I meant to say was two, just the number.
Two traditions. Oh, I thought you said true traditions. My bad.
Yeah, it could be my accent. But... And I think he was getting a phone call or something.
Wonderful, wonderful, sexy Argentine. I'm not into men, but I get every one of you on the lips for an extended period of time.
And what about your daughter?
You can't have her because she's mine. She's a beautiful thing. If she weren't my daughter,
Oh my God. That's probably the grossest thing I've heard him say or talk about.
I'm just saying that she's so attractive. Even I, who is a wonderful, amazing, successful person, would like to sleep with her. That's all I'm saying.
It's kind of sad that
to hold my daughter down, take off her clothes, and then...
Okay, that's enough. It's so funny that it doesn't sound crazy thinking of Trump saying that. That's just insane. Oh my God.
See, I gotta say that what I'm interested in, because I really haven't left the country since before Trump. Well, no, that's not true. While Trump was in office, but meaning it's like getting international perspectives on the effects or the kind of personality that Trump was relative to their nation or their region. I'd like to just get that feedback. But I'm kind of hearing it. Some of you guys aren't from here. You're aliens. But except for the guy that was doing the impressions. He's obviously from the States. Obviously.
I think most people here are from the States, but I could...
I'm nothing but a green card holder. I'm an alien.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I am.
Are you from Kenya?
I'm from Worth, Canada. Why is Canada worse? Because of socialism.
What?
Mr. Trump, what do you think of Bernie Sanders?
Okay.
Bernie Sanders is a fraud, and I'm also very afraid of him. If you look into my campaign, we were very happy that Joe Biden was the candidate. The fraud.
Maybe not so much now.
Nope, he got lucky. I guess even a broken, sleepy, stupid clock is right today.
That's not how. Oh my god.
He didn't get impeached for trying to dig up dirt on Bernie Sanders.
I'm gonna.
I got impeached for something called a perfect phone call.
And I'm not talking.
It was a wonderful thing.
And as much as this guy is probably adding like the cherry on the cake.
Nobody's ever gotten impeached before for like a phone call. Okay? It's like unheard of. You got me. I call somebody up. Hey, how was your day? Oh, I'm gonna get impeached.
Okay, have a good one. Bye.